Greetings, Assalamu alaikum, shalom, and peace be to all, and welcome to our fourth for Seed for Harvest workshop on urban gardening. I'm your host, Sister Rhonda Muhammad, and I'll take you through a journey today to discuss a community garden, but we'll get into that in a moment. This is our fourth production, and this idea came from my personal experience and doing gardening, my failures, mostly failures, but also my desire and passion to learn how to do urban gardening. I live in Oklahoma City, so urban, not originally from New York, so urban gardening as a gardening period was a little foreign for me, and definitely urban gardening. But I welcome you to our show. And another thing that we are facing right now is the COVID-19 is just hurting the Black community disproportionately, and many of them have underlying health issues. So this type of show will be beneficial for us all to learn how to take charge of our stomachs and what we eat and go into our mouths. And in addition to that, as you can notice, this, if you go to the stores, food shortage is on its way. And definitely no one could debate that when you look in the stores and see that the shelves are getting less and less food. And on top of that, we can also look at the natural disasters that are taking place and destroying farm crops. So, and we're going to predictably a cold winter. So it's going to be very important that we hold on to something, have a plan of actions to help ourselves and help our community. So just to recap, last month, we talked about greenhouses and hoop houses and getting prepared for winter gardening. Now this month we're talking about how to start your own community garden and how to get involved in one, because some you may not be interested in starting, but you want to know how to do the basics and know how to grow your own food. This is a good method or good means of learning if you are reluctant to do so yourself. So let's get into our show. I'm going to introduce the guests that we have, our panel that we have. I'm going to start with Brother Kwame Maboyo. He's a returning guest on our show. Brother Kwame, let me tell you a little about him. He's an organic row crop farmer. He's farming for the last 20 years and manages 2 acres of farm. And he is the market manager at the Northeast Oklahoma City Farmers Market. And he's a food sovereignty or advocate, which means in everyday terms, he believes in the right for people to decide what they eat and to ensure food is appropriate culturally and economically. And I got that from the grassrootsonline.com, just to have a more defined definition. And he also resides, not only in Oklahoma City, in the Midwest city, Oklahoma. Welcome, Brother Kwame, again, back to our show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome.
And I appreciate it.
Oh, pleasure's mine, Brother Kwame. Okay, we move into Sister Sharisa. Sister Sharisa, and welcome to your show. She's a new guest on our show. Let me tell you about her, get a little bio about her. Sister Teresa, along with her sisters, started the Linden Garden Association to teach people from all social, economic backgrounds how to grow their own food and why it is so important. Her main focus was our young people who had not been exposed to what it is like to have food, fresh vegetables straight from the garden. Also to show how we as a people have a direct relationship to the earth. And that is a very interesting point, which is true. She also, with her sisters, have received numerous awards, Community Gardener of the Year, that's one award, another one, Most Improved Garden, and the Smithsonian Children's Garden Fellowship Award, just to name a few. Unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 this year, their gardening projects had to be put on hold, and her group is regrouping and reorganizing for next growing season. And she and her sisters look forward to serving our community. Welcome, Sister Sharisa, to our show. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me, and I look forward to the discussion that we are going to have about community gardening and particular about how to get our young people interested in growing food for themselves and their families.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. And lastly, we have Sister Kim Muhammad. Sister Kim is from Dallas, and she is going to come from the perspective of actually being involved with the community garden. Let me tell you about her bio. Sister Kim is professionally, as she worked professionally as a social worker for 30 years, recently completed the Texas Master's Garden class, and is currently an intern while completing her volunteer hours. Her and her husband run a community garden with their local moms and coordinate the volunteers themselves. Welcome, Sister Kim, to our show.
Had a little trouble unmuting. Good evening, everybody. Greetings. I'm very happy to be a part of this workshop, and I'm looking forward to hearing from the other presenters. And I think community gardening is a great idea. It's very helpful in the pandemic times because it gives people a chance to get outside, get some air. So I think it's a great thing to do.
Okay, thank you. Thank you so very much. And thank you for being here. And we had one more guest, Barry Crumley, and I couldn't make the show. So we're going to do just fine with the group we have. I think we have a variety of different perspectives that is going to benefit all our viewers. So with that said, I always open, before I get to the actually meat and potatoes of the production or the show, I always present a opening posing question, and I call it, let's talk about it. And so this is where I ask the question of the presenters. Anyone can answer the question, and the purpose of this is always a reason why we do what we do, and so there's a bottom line about it. I know we had unification in our community. Tulsa, Oklahoma is one. There's several different Black-owned towns that we work together, and then we seem not to be able to get it together, working together. So it's a reason. So my question is going to be as such to the panelists, whoever would like to address it. How can we begin as a people to return to the mindset of investing in ourselves and collectively within our community? And as the term called EJAMA, collective work and responsibility. How can we get back to that mindset as a people?
Well, I can say one point. I think that we can try to join on with like-minded individuals. My husband and I are a part of a group called Unified Hands, and it's a group of growers, urban farm and garden entrepreneurs, other community gardeners. And so we do workshops through that. We volunteer with each other. They help you get volunteers. We have, we meet bi-weekly, and there's a period during the meeting where people can ask questions and get help with their gardens. So I think, and then through them, we located some volunteers. So it's a matter of trying to network with like-minded people, I think. And there are, you know, I don't want people to think, you know, sometimes people say Black people can't get together, that, you know, but that's not really true. There's a lot of people out there, and particularly I'm finding young people that are interested in networking, and, you know, they've got a do for self and can do attitude. So I think that we just need to find those people and join on with them.
Correct, beautiful. I think shows such as this, or looking for opening yourself to resource, finding resources. Now, since pandemic, since everyone more on quarantine or semi-quarantine sort of, it gives us an opportunity to seek out those like-minded people. Thank you. That's a good perspective. Anyone else want to address that?
Sure, I'd like to chime in on that.
Sure.
Carmen Barrio, representing the NEOKC Farmers Market.
Mm-hmm.
We have been doing this for the farmers market and the farm for the last 4 years. And in discussing with people in general, old folks and young folks, we as a people, as a Black people, have lost the art of three things: growing our foods,
Mhm.
cooking food, and preserving food.
Right.
A lot of us say that we're gonna put it on the mindset of our youth, but I tell people from addressing the age of 20 to 50, we need to get involved in this art or this science of
Right.
production, cooking, and processing food. If we
Mm.
were to do it, I think our young people below the age of 18 will chime in also. So it's very important. That is one of my passions, just to get back into this production.
Right.
Growing our food, cooking our food, and also preserving food. We can do this in this workshop. I
Yeah.
think this will be one on. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And preserving will be something that's coming up. Thank you so much, Brother Kwame. Excellent point. Anyone else, or let's see.
Yes, ma'am. I personally think that it is imperative that we get our young people to understand. I know working with the young people that I work with, and I work with students also out of my former high school,
Mm-hmm.
that one of the mindsets, it's the mindset that they had, that growing our own food was a holdover from slave days. And so it was a challenge, if you will, to get them to understand that slavery didn't have, it did have something to do with that, but it doesn't have anything to do with having fresh, healthy vegetables here, now, and today. So I think that my biggest challenge, I can't say for everyone, but my biggest challenge was the mindset of our people, that once you begin to grow your own food, then you want to get together and cook your own food. And then they want to learn, well, how do we preserve this food? How do we keep this food for our families and our friends and for future days? So I think that working on that mindset, that growing your own food isn't a slavery thing, that you are free. The messenger said that the farm is the backbone of the nation. And there's a reason why he said that.
Absolutely.
And so I think it's important that we understand that a lot of our people still associate and equate growing your own food with being enslaved. And we have to work on that mindset.
Right. Beautiful. Mindset. I know everyone dealt with mindset. It's the truth, the mindset, working and being intentional to want to change that mindset. So we have to make intentional moves, like knowing that this is how I feel, but what's the reality? What I have to do to take care of myself? Because some of us rather starve to death before we learn how to grow our own food and feed ourselves properly. And that's the truth. You see food deserts in our community, and they will just go to the junk rather than go somewhere where they can get something quality that sustain their life sustaining. All right, so thank you so much, all three guests. Beautiful responses and to a problem that we are intentionally trying to solve. Okay, let's move this along. The first, I'm going to go some housekeeping before we go to the panelists to speak. I'm going to talk about the flow of the presentations and or the rest of the meeting today. We'll start with the presenters that will present. We'll stop after the presenters present with a commercial break, which is we'll celebrate Black-owned businesses, information that individuals sent about their business that would like to promote free advertisement. That's what we do. And following that, we'll do a Q&A, which Sister Kadira will come in and also deal with any questions that the viewers have. So as the presenters are speaking, you can go to the chat and type in your questions to a particular presenter, or you can type your questions to just in general to the panel. So you can spend time doing that so she can compile the questions for that portion of our presentation. And I like to give a shout out to cities that support this. So you can, even if you don't have a question, you can still put in the chat what city you're in. So at the end, I like to give a shout out for your support from your city or your location. And then following after that, we will close with announcements and remarks. And then we'll celebrate the community gardens that came in which people, individuals mailed in or emailed to us so we can share their gardens. We celebrate the smallest to the largest garden, the beginning to the experienced person. We celebrate anything that sounds good or is good. Okay, moving along. I'm going to start with the presenter, Brother Kwame, first. He is going to share with us about his with community garden, that starting from his knowledge basis, he's gonna give information that he thinks is pertinent to individuals that are interested in starting their own community garden. So, Brother Kwame, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Okay, let me pull up this slide presentation that your lovely daughter has showed me how to start this and see if I can do it accordingly. Yes.
It's up.
All right. Are we on?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Planning a community garden. Planning a community garden. Community garden is a beautiful, beautiful thing. I've been with the NEOKC Farmers Market for the last 4 years. I work with Langston University Extension Department up under Linda Tillman in setting up community gardens around the northeast sector of Oklahoma, which is considered a food desert, and also work with organization in Atlanta, Georgia, setting up a community gardens while I was there over the last 25 years. In 25 years, so I do have some expertise or knowledge in planning a community garden. Okay, now first of all, we have to look at laws and land access. We have to look at zoning. We had in our last presentation greenhouse or high tones or hoop houses, laws concerning animal housing, laws on rooftop and ball gardenings, and of course, laws pertaining to food safety. These are model zoning ordinance for community gardens. There's open space protection for community garden and use zones protections for community gardens. The models and the language, of course, that deals with both and how can you get this access to land for open space or use zone protection gardens. There are certain laws and regulations in every city and community about how you can use land, if it's just vacant land or land owned by different institutions. So we do have to do researching about the zoning aspect of whatever garden where we are located in the various communities that you are thinking about putting up a community garden or community gardens. Greenhouses and green and high tone, of course. Now, there are certain permits that allows greenhouses or high tones. Is there a size limitation? We have our first greenhouse that we set up for our community garden, and our greenhouse is 34 by 60. That is a big, big greenhouse, so we can do a whole lot of production up under that. So you have to check the laws or the ordinance in your community about or there are any laws that require like building permits and things of this nature. Ornament housing. Now you might have on your community garden chickens, or you might have goats, or you might have cows, or whatever. Now, or there are animal agriculture permits for chickens. I know 2 or 3 years ago in Oklahoma City, they actually were passing an ordinance about chickens in the city limits, how many chickens you could have or was chickens permitted. So certain communities don't allow chickens. So you have to check the orders about it. If there is a agricultural permit that you have to have. Is a building permit required for chicken coops and other animal housing. So you're just going to set up you a chicken pen or something to house goats, and then there's ordinance come along the next week to have you to tear that down. Next one is how far away must animals live from residential buildings or property lines? Some people might not want chickens or guineas right next to them. So what is the law in your city that requires residential buildings for animals? Now, we have other forms of garden that's not just open field gardens or land. You have rooftop gardens and wall gardens and things of this nature. Now, in Oklahoma City, we have abundance of land. We have land out everywhere, particularly in the northeast sector. We have a community garden in Spencer, Oklahoma, which is considered the part of the northeast sector, and it's 10 miles from downtown. So we really don't have the need for a rooftop or a wall garden. But if you do live in the city like Dallas or Fort Worth, Atlanta, Georgia, New York, or wherever, you might not have access to this land. So you might want to consider about putting that garden on top of one of your buildings. Or there are also putting a garden on your interior walls of a building that's in your area. So we can cover a whole lot of ground if you do not have access to land. Put the garden on your rooftop. You can put a garden on your exterior walls. And there are various ways you can do both. Food safety. It's illegal to sell processed food out of your home kitchen. And there is a certain thing called the cottage food law. I think these laws have been enacted in all 50 states that allow people to cook at their homes and don't have to have a commercial kitchen. And if you cannot do that, can you have access to a commercial kitchen where you might want to rent? There are certain organizations, might be schools or it might be just a private organization that has a commercial kitchen that you can utilize that. How much would it cost to rent that? Zoning for urban garden. Now, this is our layout of a city. You can see different gardens scattered throughout the community. What does it require for that zoning? Now, this is our NEOKC farmers market. It's the little diagram. As Sister Wanda said, we have leased 2 acres of land in Spencer, Oklahoma. And you can see the outline of what we've done. Now, in this house, we just leased this land approximately 3 months ago, and we did real good. And the food that we raised on the land in this little area, we sold at our farmers market. We call the NEOKC farmers market, and we're open from April through October of the year. And we do that every Saturday from 9 to 11. So all the food that we grow on this little acre, 2 acres of land, all of it is organic foods. We haven't got any chickens yet. We plan to have some chickens and some goats. And you can see a little shed in the middle of that where we plan to do that. 2 acres of land, and we can grow a whole lot of foods on that 2 acres. The little green area, or this little greenish blue area, we plan to put an orchard where we grow our own fruit trees. So it can be 1 acre, or 2 acres could be 100 acres, or it could just be a city block, city lot where you can plan and also grow your own food for the community. Now, after you have a sense of a land use agreement, one of our presenters said, sure, we had to have a like-minded people, but with the like-minded people, we had to have a land use agreement for the land. When we started out the NEOKC Farmers Market, we had some land, but was one of my relatives' land. It was one of those verbal contracts that we get into. But however, what happened was one of her relatives didn't really like what we were doing on the land. It was approximately 2 acres of land. And she said we had to go. So in suing a community garden, make sure if you rent the land, have a land use agreement, or if you buy the land, what the ordinance requires for community garden particular. Land, first of all, specification of size and location, rent, cost to the tenants, use of the land, specification of permitted use and prohibited sale, trees removal, etc., or fires, terms, duration of the lease, option at the end of the lease. So you might want to have a 1 year, 2 year, or 5 year, or 10 year lease on that property. Do you have an option to renew the lease? You might have done some improvement on the land and things of this nature, but at the end of your time, they might say you have to go. So you want to have the first option on that land that you're diligently work. Buildings and improvement. What kind of buildings that the city ordinance require that you can put up. Then right of entry. You might be in a place where you have land, but you might not have any place to enter. How can you get access to that land? Continue. Hours of use. Days of activities and things of this nature. Now, you might be next to a church, or you might be next to some other organization that want to limit your hours of use or your days activities. So you want to have that in your land use agreement. Animals. What kind of animals we were talking about? Again, that's up to the city. You might have chickens, you might have hogs, or you might have goats or sheep or whatever. And certain type of things, the person who leases the land to you might not want those animals to appear. So make sure you have that in your land lease agreement. Expected traffic. Your leaser might not want all kind of traffic. Growing practice, use of machines and tools, use of pesticides, fertilizers, and fungicides. Well, if you're doing organic gardening, you might not have, might be not doing any of this, but certain people, certain leases might not want their land poisoned, pesticides, fertilizers, or fungicides. Environment impact. You have water runoff and other pollutions too that might be on your community garden, so you have to get that in writing, what type of things that are used with state regulation and also city regulations too. Water uses. Where will the water come from? Will we have well water, or will it be municipal water? And if so, who's going to pay for the water? Now, in that NEOKC Farmers Market, of course, we got a permit from the city of Spencer, and the water that we use is not on the leaser, it's on us. Liability. Of course, you want to have some type of liability clause in there. Something were to happen. Who's the liability? To make sure it's like a two-way release. Who is that on? What? If you were to go to law and somebody gets sued, you need to have, now we have like $1 billion, $10 billion liability clause at our farmers market. So if something were to happen, we can result to that. Right there is the picture. You see some of the people who are actively working in the garden. Sadly, but I have to say the majority of our people working in the garden are females. We'd love to have some more men, period. But I don't know about the other presenters. We do need men who will help labor and do the community garden. So we are in search of males. The females are coming. They love to work, get out of the houses or whatever and get their hands dirty as far as community garden. Now, everybody don't have to be in the fields planting, chopping weeds and things of this nature. You might have somebody who does the community garden, like the bookkeeping or distribution of foods and things of this nature. So, like-minded people, as one of the presenters said, make sure you have some type of roles or written roles of how people utilize as far as working the land, the distribution of the land, things of this nature. Right here, I have an African heritage type pyramid. Now, our dike, of course, one of the presenters say, if we're going to have a community garden, let it be through proper dikes. And our bodies are a little different, and we need certain foods in our diet to sustain us and help keep us strong. And so we can carry on for the task of the day. The African heritage food diet includes like leafy greens, what you can grow in any area of the United States. Fortunately, in Oklahoma City, we can grow pretty well through all 12 months of the year. The leafy greens, which are a cool weather crop, we can grow those in the spring, and also we grow them in the fall. Matter of fact, we are growing leafy greens right now for the fall and the fall season and the winter season. Vegetables, asparagus, beets, okra, eggplants, beans, onions, black-eyed peas, green beans, carrots, garlic. A lot of these foods right here are foods that are all indigenous African food. Eggplant, which you don't see very much or hear much of consumer, that's African food. Okra and things of this nature. So some of these foods are, I assume that everybody have heard of Dr. Spay. Some of these foods are included in his diet, and they're very good for us, for the health and maintenance of. And of course, these foods you can grow right here in a place in the United States. They have different zoning laws, which you can get from your extension department. But if you're working with an extension department, hopefully you work with one of the HBCUs or the Black Historical Colleges all around the United States. Fruits and vegetables, fruits, watermelon, cantaloupe, squashes, peaches, plums, blackberries, blueberries, cherries, dates, figs, lemons, and we go on and on. Nuts, peanuts, walnuts, and etc. And of course, herbs. Herbs are the thing that not only give spice and flavor to the foods, but you can grow these things right there where you are. All these in the community gardens on the thing with this plant. Let's get going. This presentation is brought to you by the NEOKC Farmers Market. Thank you. And I have any questions at the last of the presentation.
Absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much, Brother Kwame. Very wholesome, beautiful checklist for anyone that want to get started, or a resource, a good resource guide as well. But I have a couple of questions. Where can we find out, if someone's interested in finding out the laws where they are located, where can they find that? And the second question, money. How do we deal with the money part?
Money part. What we did when we started out our community garden, we had like a monthly fee where we contributed a certain amount of money among our members. And we just had about 8 members, and we do this
Wow.
daily. In the midst of this COVID virus, or whatever you want to call it, we did get some stimulus money that was particularly geared for gardening or the farmers, and that has helped us a lot. Our funding comes from also the food and the vendors we have at our community garden, at our food market. I'm proud to say that we are Black owned and Black operated, So we do not get any fundings from
Wow.
white philanthropy
Wonderful.
or things of this nature. All our funding comes from Black resources.
Beautiful.
Through our self-taxation, selling at our farmers market, but we've been doing exceptionally well as far as funding as required.
Well, beautiful. So there's the cooperative economics. You
Definitely.
don't have to get the monies outside. You can come like you. Everyone said like-minded people to make that happen. Beautiful. And the last thing before I move on quickly to Sister Teresa, um, just a question, the laws, is this some resource that people can go to find the laws in their areas?
Yes. If you were to go to your university extension department, we have, of course, Langston University, which is about 40 miles from Oklahoma City. We can always go to them. Also, there's the Oklahoma State University. You could also go to your extension department in your state, and they will deal with any laws and regulations. They can give you a general briefing on what you need to be expected to. Then, of course, you can go to your city, get your city leaders involved. We have a beautiful person by the name of Honorable Nick and I. She's been very resourceful to us, how we can organize. Of course, she's a beautiful young Black lady. Get your city leaders involved, and they can direct you towards the citizens, the audience of laws that you will be confronted with as far as starting your community garden.
Okay, thank you so very much, Brother Colin. That was beautiful. Thank you so much. Now we're going to move on to Sister Teresa. I know she has amazing information and also amazing journey, or coming from Ohio, Columbus, Ohio. Am I correct?
Yes,
Ohio.
ma'am.
Yes. So she has an amazing journey and amazing information. Talking with her was a pleasure and enlightened me so much. So the floor is yours.
Thank you. As far as we here in Columbus, we're lucky in one sense because the city of Columbus recognized that they had a lot of empty lots where dilapidated houses or abandoned houses had been torn down. And they knew they wanted to do something with these lots, and they weren't really sure at first what they were going to do. So our city council person, city councilwoman Priscilla Tyson, who is a gardener herself, suggested that those lots be opened up for people who were looking to grow within the city, but not necessarily had enough space to do it within their backyard. And so that's how we got started. We started off with a little over an acre. And then we added on to that. So we have approximately 4 acres that we're gardening or farming at this time. They are not contiguous, which means they're not all together. So one lot is on one street and one lot is on another street and 2 lots on a different street, but they're all within about 100 feet of one another, which makes it easy. The first one we started out, we called it our community garden 2 because there were 2 lots. And then we were blessed, my sisters and I were very, very blessed that we were able to purchase the very first garden that we started out with. We were also very blessed because our soccer team, which I absolutely love soccer, in our area chose our gardens to do what they called a massive makeover. So Major League Soccer chose us and they came in and they redid our entire garden. So we were able to take the monies that we would have used to do, put into that particular garden and start the second garden, which is our children's garden. And when I say it's our children's garden, it is our children's garden. When we go over there as adults, they look at us like, well, why are you even here? We got this. So our biggest problem with that particular garden was water. And the city of Columbus, through Priscilla Tyson, Councilwoman Tyson, came in and gave us a 500-gallon water tank. The high school that I went with, since I taught in the science department at that high school, they gave us a small grant along with Franklin Park Conservatory, and we were able to put in a pollinator garden on so that our children could learn about pollination and actually come out of the high school and see what it is like to be out in the field with the food and capture the butterflies, tag them, and so on and so forth. And then the city tore down a house across the street and asked us if we wanted that. So that's where we have our fruit tree garden. Didn't do too well last year. The weather caught us, so we're looking forward to working again and kind of building that up. So as I stated, we have approximately 4 acres of land that we garden. We mainly garden with children, because we do work with the high schools. We work with the Upward Bound program. We work with Columbus State. We work with students who are going to Central State. And the Smithsonian gave us a small grant because we work with children who were in preschool. And so they wanted to get children interested in gardening at a very young age. So most of our projects revolve around children from the age of 3 to about 17 or 18. And of course, when you bring a 3-year-old out to the garden, they want their parents to come and see. So a lot of times, even though the children don't always live in our area, they will bring their parents back to the garden. We do work with a lot of children in our area. We have a lot of Hispanic children as well that we deal with. And so we are kind of a full service thing. The oldest gardener that we have, Miss Brown, may Allah be pleased with her, she passed away last year, was 96. And even though Miss Brown really didn't get up and work in the garden, she certainly told us what to do in the garden. So we were very, very blessed to have all our young people out in the garden, learning how not just to grow food, but the importance of the pollinators, the importance of why it's important to have your own food in a community where we don't have a grocery store that is close by. The city of Columbus, in one sense, is very supportive, and in another sense, just like all cities, they're not. So just like our previous presenter said, we try to be totally sustainable, self-sustainable, and not rely on other people. We don't apply for too many grants. We did in the beginning, but I found myself, along with my sisters, spending so much time filling out paperwork that we didn't really have time to be in the gardens. So once we got to a certain point, we just decided that we're going to work with our children, take the money that we get from selling our vegetables at the farmer's market, redistribute some of that back to the children, and keep a small budget to pay for the water and other things that we may need ourselves. So the way we do our funding is that the children who grow, and it's usually anywhere from 10 to 20 children, when we as adults go to the farmer's market and sell the products on their behalf, we come back and distribute that money to them. And you would be surprised at how just a small amount of money, because most of them, they don't get over more than maybe $100, but that is really a big deal to a child who's 9 or 10 years old. So they look forward to every year. And unfortunately, this year, because of the COVID, we were not able to work with the groups that we normally work with. Of course, schools are closed here in Columbus, and they probably will not open maybe until sometime next year. Unlike in Oklahoma, we don't have a long growing season. Our growing season starts around the end of May and ends around November 1st. Even though Ohio is a farm territory, we have to get our crops in early, harvest early, and be done by November 1st and preparing the soil so that we can get started for the next year, which gives us all winter long to kind of plan what we're going to do, how we're going to grow, how we're going to rotate our crops, and to organize the children for next year. So our focus is on our youth, and I tell everybody one of the most exciting things is to go over to the children's garden and you see them over there running and playing And it also makes a safe place for them to play. When you're in the inner city, you really sometimes don't have a safe place for your children to play. And in the wintertime, I'll go over there and I'll see all these little snowmans everywhere and forts, and there's always toys everywhere. So that gives them a safe place to play as well. So the gardens are more than just a garden to grow food. It's also a safe place for the children. It's a bird habitat. It's a butterfly habitat. We put in a honeybees, and I tell you, the bees are so fascinating. That is one of the best babysitters you can have. The children will stand there and watch the bees for at least an hour, just watching them fly in and out. So it's been a delight and a pleasure to be the coordinator of the Linden Garden Association, and I'm really looking forward to getting back out in the garden next year.
Absolutely beautiful. Thank you so very much. I'm thinking, my wheels in my mind are turning and churning because I'm thinking of what I can do to get started myself. I just didn't have any thoughts on really making this happen, but you definitely gave me inspiration to want the mindset is the key, finding like minds to get started,
Yes.
to make it happen. I have a question for you, Sister
Okay.
Carissa. Tell me any challenges that you face when you decided to get started, and where did you go first? Because I'm finding when it's very challenging sometimes to find the resources, although you may have the information, but to find the right person or persons to assist you it could be even more of a second level of challenge with people. So share any challenges you face even with the idea getting started, and what did you turn to first?
Our biggest challenge was actually finding the lot that was not full of poison. Because naturally, when you tear down an older building, you're going to have lead, asbestos, and things of that nature. So we really had to look for a lot that we knew we could grow in. We never did find one that didn't have that. So our next challenge was, well, how do we grow our food without poisoning ourselves? And that's why we
Wow.
mainly have raised beds in our garden. We don't really grow directly in the ground. Our second biggest challenge was water. And everybody thinks, oh, we're just going to go out here and we're going to garden and everything. But we found that without water, you don't have a garden. In June, late June, July, and August in Ohio, it is 95 degrees consecutively. And it's a dry 95. We probably don't get rain for 3-4 weeks at a time. So that was our major challenge. How do we grow the food without poisoning ourselves, and where do we get our water from? And as I stated, we were very, very blessed because our Columbus Crew soccer team came in and laid the foundation for a water system, and then we raised the money to complete that water system. And that water system was $4,000.
Whoa.
So I was like, whoa, where are we going to get $4,000? And then the city of Columbus did give us a $250 grant to complete the water system after we did some fundraising and things. And they also gave us a rain tank that holds 550 gallons of water.
Mm-hmm.
And our high school students, their job was to design a system to collect this rainwater. So once we got the water in, and once we decided how are we going to grow our food, since we knew we couldn't grow directly into the ground, then it was almost smooth sailing after that. But we really, really struggled. And it took us about 6 months to kind of figure out how are we going to overcome this issue of the lack of water and the fact that the soil itself we couldn't grow in it at all.
Right. Beautiful. I just pick up something, another key, like mindset, and also children. Yes, adults we're so busy. We have 1,000 things. We fall off quicker. I'm assuming because projects I've done, but children get children excited and interested. That could be another. Like Brother Kwame would say all the time, the children getting the young people involved,
Right.
and that's the key. That is a very strong key because once you get them involved and interested, you really could help grow the project even more so and open many
Yes.
other doors.
Yeah.
Totally in agreement. Thank you so very much. That was very, very informative and very wholesome as well, coming from the perspective of owners of community gardens. Yes, but I want to be an owner of a community garden. I'm encouraged. But what if I don't want to be because I don't know what I'm doing and I would need some support as a system? And that's where Sister Kim will tell us and be the inspiration for of not only but being a part of, and maybe help someone else want to be a part of, because I think the time is now. Sister Kim, it's time for you.
Greetings, family. I and my husband work in Dallas at the community garden on Peabody, and it is a garden that's um, on a city lot. It has no home on it. The home was, torn down years ago. It hasn't been there for 30 years. And the lot was donated to our local mosque. And through our mosque agricultural ministry, my husband and I started working with that. And there were some people, the school, our little mosque school had put 4 little raised beds over there. And the children would go over and learn a little bit about growing plants from time to time. But now we have about, I'd say 10, maybe more than that, raised beds there. And they're probably 10 feet by 3 feet or 4 feet. And we had watermelons this year, okra, bell peppers. Those are the things we have growing now. Basil, cucumbers are starting to come back in. We have some corn planted there, some squash. And what we're using our garden for is to teach people how to garden. So people that know very little, like I started gardening, home gardening about 20 years ago. My grandmother grew, but she didn't teach me. And so I was reading books and, doing what I could. And my husband was also interested in gardening, and he helped as a very, very young child with his grandfather's farm. But together we've learned to grow food. And so now we're trying to teach other people, and we make people come over and volunteer at our garden. And that's pretty much what we're doing right now. And then to help improve my skills and learn more about plants, I recently took the, this year in January, I started the Texas Master Gardener class. And one of the really good things about that is you get an opportunity as an intern to go volunteer in other people's gardens. And so I've worked at the Texas Discovery Garden and learned about flowers, which I like that too. They just beautiful flowers. And then I've volunteered at others' community garden. There's a demonstration garden at the through the Texas Agricultural Extension Service that I've worked at. So you're out with master gardeners learning how to care for plants and put in plants and raise transplants and that type of thing. And then I've gone over to a local temple and volunteered there. And they actually grow food and take it from, what they do with their food is they donate it to a food pantry. So I just think it's a good opportunity to learn about, learn from others. I'm trying to learn how to run a really successful community garden and use some of the things I'm learning from others. And I think that volunteering, I was telling Sister Rhonda that during the pandemic, people are trapped in, a lot of people are like confined to their homes. And so they're not getting that much sunshine. They don't have that much social interaction, maybe not as much exercise as they normally would. They may be working at home and then staying at home. But if you garden, you have an opportunity to go outside, get some sunshine, get some air, get some exercise. And in our community garden situation, there are people that are coming in, but you're socially distanced. You know, within the garden, you can socially distance, but work with others and, you know, bring something to fruition. So I think it's a good counter to the pandemic. It helps with that. So that's pretty much it.
Okay. Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much, Sister Kim. I did the volunteer part because I was trying to think of how can people get involved, volunteer in the master's program. Now, the master's program that you were in, that was a paid program. You had to pay into it, or is it a free program? You could do master's courses. How does that work?
The way it works is you pay a fee. It's not a very large fee. It was $200 and some. And but the thing is, you have to. I had to wait until I retired because you have to go. The classes are like they were from 8 to 3:30, one day a week. So you have to have the time to devote to attend the classes. But there are community gardens like if you just keep your eyes peeled. There's one in a they're all around. You'll find community gardens, and many of them would probably let you come and volunteer and help, or you could. If I were interested in working in a community garden, I would probably Google. I do several things. Approach Black organizations that might, like that's how we got involved in. We're in a group called Unified Hands. It's a growing group, and that's how we got involved with them. They held an event at the local Black bookstore called Pan African Connection. So we attended that event and then learned about this growing group and joined, my husband and I. And there are several other community gardens that are a part of that. So if you were interested in something like that, you could go to like bookstores in your area. I would go on Facebook. There are Facebook groups that have, like there's one called Grow North Texas, I think here. And it's not Black, but it's just like a whole bunch of growers. So I think that you can, we participated in a holistic festival, the Black Holistic Festival that was with vegans. So I would go through Black groups and look for Black organizations that have community gardens or are aware of them and could, you know, refer you.
Okay, beautiful. Thank you. So I hear volunteer, looking and Googling resources, and maybe taking a master's course, which gives you more expertise. But in between it, you can also get resources from being involved, getting yourself involved. That's what you're saying.
Oh yeah, well, you can learn a lot.
I'm sorry.
You can learn a lot just by. We've had like people that come to our group. We had a sister that came with her 2 boys, and they volunteered with us every Saturday. They help water plants, help plant, you know, put in transplants or put in seeds, and now they have their own garden at home. So
beautiful.
They were able to take their experience and use it at home to grow their own, start growing their own things.
Beautiful. So wonderful. So I'm hearing that there's this different dynamics that you can do with no excuse that we can learn. Like my person like myself, still learning how to do it. I can learn it even faster by getting involved in my community or looking to start one myself. Thank you. Wonderful panel, wonderful information. I'm hearing like mind is first. I'm hearing volunteering. I'm hearing children. And I'm hearing all these dynamics, which leaves people no excuse to do something and get involved. We want to work while it's day, while it's an opportunity to do so, and the resources are available. Because knowing that what's happening now, we can all pretend there's nothing happening, but if you look to see every day, the news is saying something is occurring, either natural disasters, either illnesses are increasing. So we have to do something about salvaging ourselves in our community, and the resources that we got today we have no excuse. to finding something that you can do to learn. If you don't know, I can't grow anything, get involved in your community. Thank you so very much, all three panelists, for wonderful and valuable information that you just shared with us. Now, if you have any questions, don't forget to go to the chat. You have the opportunity to get your questions in now, because following, we're going to go into a commercial break, which is celebrating Black businesses. Some of the panelists' information will be on it as well, and you can use their contact information on other businesses. This is a free means of getting your information out as far as if your Black businesses promoted. So utilize this opportunity. And following after that, we have Q&A. We'll go from myself to Sister Kadira, which she will address any questions of the panelists have. So get your questions in now, and if your shout outs, let me know what city you're tuning into so we can give you a shout out at the end of the program. So give us a moment as we transition into a commercial break, coming back with Q&A.
So, good evening, everyone. So now we have entered into the second portion of From Seed to Harvest, which is our Q&A session. So just as a reminder, if you have any questions, please put it in the chat, and I will ask the panelists for you. And also, if you have a question specifically to a specific person, please please also add their name so that I know to direct the question to them. So we're going to begin with the questions that people had asked earlier, starting with Brother Kwame. Someone had asked now this is not necessarily a question on the community gardens, but you did mention this, which is which seasons produce the most crops?
Fortunately, in Oklahoma City, I can see like the early spring, but particularly in the summer season, June, July, and August, or the most productive as far as crops are concerned. But as I said before in my presentation, we can produce in Oklahoma crops all year round. Like in the fall, we can grow our greens, and also in the fall, we can grow our greens. So at the presentation, you saw at the bottom of the food chain, which is the bottom of the basic, or leafy greens. Leafy greens are very valuable as far as our foods, as far as our diets are concerned. So you can grow greens probably from March until October, November. And if you have a hoop house, what was the presentation at the last farm to harvest, excuse me, information on hoop houses. If you have a hoop house, you can extend your production season and extend those months, and you can grow particularly all year round. Anywhere in the United States, in a zone, you can probably grow food. So money is involved. Of course, the money is just pull your little resources together and get your hoop house, and let's get growing.
Awesome. So another question, actually, I'll mention this. Someone had asked if they would like to visit your farmer's market or growing site. Can you provide the address? So I know that's for Brother Kwame, but also Sister Carissa, and even Sister Kim. If you could perhaps provide your addresses, and we also had it in the Black Business presentation. You can always go back to that when we have that recording. But also, if someone has those questions about providing those addresses, you can email us from seedtoharvest20@gmail.com, and we can get you in contact with the hosts that way as well if you weren't able to get it in for the Black-owned business presentation. So the next question is, what type of vegetables can be grown from an exterior wall garden? For anyone on the panel.
I know we have one small area in our garden where we have what we call the hanging garden, and tomatoes are a vine, so they can grow up, but they also can grow over and grow down. So our children have experimented with growing tomatoes off of a log, basically, that we had to chop down one of the trees, and the children planted in that log, which is kind of high up, and it actually grew down and grew over. And so you can grow tomatoes very easily from a hanging garden. We also have grown some berries, not a lot. We just put in a couple of blackberry bushes about a year ago, maybe 2 years ago now, and they did very well growing down. So those strawberries are another one that is a vine plant that grows very well hanging down. So those are three that I can recommend for the Ohio area.
Okay, and thank you. Does anyone else have anything to expound on that question?
Yes, you can grow any type of greens. Try herbs. You can grow herbs, excuse me, on the wall garden. Beans, as the lady said before. You can grow any type of food that hangs, like maybe like your squashes and things of this nature will be perfect. Because as the vines grow longer, the food, number one, will not be touching the ground and it becomes sort of extended. You can have some beautiful squashes that are grown on the walls. But practically any type of vegetables that I mentioned before, like your leafy vegetables, your herbs, your tomatoes, things of this nature, sure, try on growing on the wall or just experiment. You'd be surprised what you can do. I mean, if you're growing on it, if you do not have access to light, try to have those your walls facing like the east so they can get the most exposure to the sun, that good light, and have a good exposure at least 6 to 8 hours a day. And be surprised what you grow on the wall.
That's actually really cool. When you mentioned wall gardening, I was really excited. So that's really interesting to get a further insight on that. Sister Kim, did you have anything to add to that?
No, I think they mentioned most of what you could grow. We grow things in pots sometimes, and so like tomatoes, and I've never grown green beans in a pot, but I imagine that you could and let it hang, and the squash as well. Although squash get pretty big. You know, they spread really, really big.
Okay, thank you for adding on to that. I mean, that was still very valuable information to know that as well. So another question someone had is, how do you know when a lot is good for planting crops? And how do you prepare a lot for growing? For anyone on the panel.
Yes, ma'am. You can have the soil tested. There is you can send it to, we send our soil to Penn State University, but you also can go to your extension center, like the brother said, and there are soil tests that you can do to see what's in your soil, and they can tell you what you can use to remediate your soil, how much compost you're going to need, what kind of compost you're going to need. Most of the time, unfortunately, they recommend chemicals, and so that's why we chose to use the raised beds instead, because we didn't want to take the chemical route. But you can have the soil tested, and it's very extensive, and it's not that much. I think to have our soil tested was only $15.
Yeah.
Oh.
Let me chime in on that.
Mm-hmm.
One thing that you can do if you have your soil tested, but the beautiful thing about urban garden is use as much compost as you can get a hold to. Some cities have places where you can just pick up compost free of charge, or you might pay a small fee instead of going to like a Home Depot's or Lowe's, etc. You can go and get you just a truckload of compost. Probably cost you more than $10 to $20. You can pay $10 to $20 just for a 5-pound bag of compost. Use as much compost as you can. And what we do at our garden is we try the minimum to tilt the soil. We put cardboard on the soil to keep the weeds out. Then we load it 2 to 3 inches of compost, and you'd be surprised what that compost do. Good compost now. Or you can make your own compost yourself. You can go to YouTube University, get some ideas about composting. And in the land, if you don't have the soil tested, or even if you do have the soil tested, use as much compost as possible. Then you don't have to be putting those chemicals, those fertilizers on your land. You can let the compost do its thing. Our great late leader from Tuskegee Institute taught us this about the value of the use of compost. Use that compost. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Wow. Thank you again for both for your answers. So the next question, as we're entering into the winter months, and some people might want to start a community garden tomorrow. I hope so. I hope we have been inspired to start one, if not already get involved in one that already exists. But if we're just starting out, someone had asked, how do you maintain the ground during the cold season, especially because we have people coming from who are tuning in from all over the country. So unfortunately, some people might not have the season we have in Oklahoma. But for those who would like to start gardening now, how would you do that?
Am I unmuted?
Yes, ma'am.
What I would do is start preparing the ground for the next growing season, whatever that is in your area. If you have sod down like grass, you can cover it up with cardboard, and the lack of light will start to kill the grass underneath, because it's really hard to remove sod. It's kind of it's hard to dig up. It's a lot of work, and so that'll start killing the grass for you. You could start composting, like Brother Kwame was saying. You could start. You can make like a lasagna thing where you take compost, which would be like your vegetable peels, vegetables that you throw away because they're not cooked but raw vegetables, grass clippings, leaves, cardboard, paper, let me think what else, coffee grinds. And you can either layer. Some things are they're hot. That's the nitrogen, like the vegetable peels, and the green grass clippings, or the dry things like straw or leaves, or you can layer them. And the things that are wet, the nitrogen breaks down quicker, but it will build a really nice soil for you, so that when you get ready to start, it'll be there. And if you chop up the vegetables, the vegetable peels and the leaves, it makes it break down quicker. And I found out from one of my internships is that what they actually do is they take their lawnmower, and they just, before they add them to the compost, they just run over them with the lawnmower, kind of raise it up if it's kind of big, and it chops it up finely for them, and it'll break down a lot quicker. In a few weeks, you'll have some pretty good soil. You'll start building your soil, and you can just pile that on top of the cardboard, and then maybe, like if you say you're doing that now, and you're going to plant in March, by March, it will have broken down pretty good. And it would be better. You can also use newspaper too, like layers of newspaper piled on top of the grass, where in the area where you intend to plant.
Wow, thank you. Does anyone have anything to expound on that in terms of if they were starting growing in the winter months?
Yes, ma'am.
Mm-hmm.
For the city of Columbus, you cannot use open compost. We have an area where we have a lot of, we call them leftover hippies, but in that particular area, they were doing a lot of composting, and they developed a rodent problem. So the city of Columbus, in order to compost, you have to have a compost bin. And you can get those compost bins very inexpensively off of Facebook, or if you just want to go to Lowe's or Home Depot, I think they're about $100. So what we have about 5 compost bins, and basically we just compost all winter long. And our children, it's amazing once you show them what composting is and how the soil is. So our children all winter long are bringing their vegetable peels and things like that, throwing them in the compost bin, turning those compost bins once or twice, so that when we're ready to start really growing and really, really enriching our soil at the beginning of May, middle of May, we just go empty all our compost bins from the what the children have already added to those bins. So I don't know if there's a rule everywhere, but in the city of Columbus, they have strict rules about composting. And that goes back to what the brother was saying about really knowing the rules in your city and how to go about it. Also, the Conservatory, Franklin Park Extension and Franklin Park Conservatory, once a year, they will allow us to come and get the compost. You have to load it yourself, but they'll allow us to come and get compost from their leftover compost because Franklin Park Conservatory is huge. I can't remember how many acres it is, but it's huge, and they're composting all year long. So those are two ways that we here in Columbus are able to get compost to make sure that our soil is good for the growing season. And it's just like the sister said, when late October and the 1st of November comes around, we do what she does. We layer. We roll our lawnmowers. We go collect the leaves. Our neighbors know to save all their raked up leaves. We spread it out over our lots. We chop them all up with the lawnmower, put the lawnmower bag on them, gather them up, cover it up, and then put the cardboard on them and wait for the first snow to come, and we're done.
Okay, okay.
Did you have something to add, Brother?
That's beautiful. That's what I'm telling you. These two ladies are right on it. Also, you might have heard of the term like green manure. That is used in things like the lagoons and things of this nature to put on your soil during the winter time. And these lagoons, peas and things will grow throughout the winter months. They really grow during the spring. You don't want to leave your land barren, of course, as the young ladies said before. Put cover with some lagoons or things of nature, or peas and things of nature. Let them grow. And then at the end, when the dry plants and things of this nature. So when the springtime comes, all you had to do was cut them down. You buy a good barrel. You also choke out some of those weeds. If you have like wood grass and things of this nature, you choke those things out. And you have a really perfect set. Well, the main thing, what you want to do, you want to grow your soil. Grow your soil. And your soil will grow your vegetables. Grow your soil, and the soil will grow your vegetables. You can have an inferior plant and put it in some good soil, and it grow amazing. And you can have a good plant and put it in inferior soil, and if that grow your soil. So during the winter months, grow those soils at the recommendation of the other two presenters said, and you'll be just fine.
So how would someone grow your soil? And also, when you say legumes, do you also mean things like lentils, like just anything in the general legumes category?
Yes.
Growing?
Yes.
Okay. So then how do you, like, what's the starting process of growing your soil then in that way?
Adding compost, like the brother was saying, he's like saying the cover crops, the legumes are like cover crops that you grow just to kind of hold the soil, and it puts nitrogen back into the soil. But adding like continually, your soil gets depleted as you grow things. It takes the nutrients out of the soil. So if you put compost into the soil, and one thing I forgot to add that you can put into your compost, there's something called Texas green sand, and it just happens to be from Texas. But you can, my husband did some training up with Will Allen out of Milwaukee, and that was one of the things that he added to his compost too. But you can, when you put that compost back into your beds, like we raise bed garden, but you could do, mostly we do a little row cropping, but mostly we do raised beds. But you could do however you grow, you just add that compost back into your soil, and it's going to build the nutrients back up into your soil. You've already composted it, right? And then and what happens after you compost it, for those of you that may not know, it turns into like a black, dark, not necessarily black, but a dark, loamy, kind of light soil that holds moisture. Like our native sand soil in Texas, a lot of it is clay. And so it's real hard and dry and cracked like concrete. It's hard like concrete when it's dry. And when it's wet, it's gummy, and it doesn't have the air pockets in it that plants need for the roots. So when you add compost, it lightens the soil. but some people have sandy soil, but it adds like some, you know, oomph to their soil. So it makes their soil better. So whatever type of soil you have, by adding compost, you're building the quality of your soil, like the brother said, and it's going to grow. Like, we fertilize some, and we've done some worm farming where we get the worm castings and add that. Like, we use that in our community garden and in our home garden this year. But you can, it will draw the worms, the native worms, to your soil. They put air pockets in it. So just because they eat that composted material, and so it's just going to make your soil better all the way around.
That's incredible. Wow. That just goes back into expounding our understanding of gardening and how that can really inform us, not just with community gardening, but also our personal gardens as well. And as I go into the last few questions, just a reminder that this doesn't have to be over quite yet. If you have any more questions, you can type it in the chat. And for those who are on Facebook Live, yes, we have viewers on Facebook Live. You can type your questions in the comment section below, and I will ask them to the panelists for you. So another question someone had was about getting in contact with you, specifically with Sister Carissa. And just a reminder that you can get in contact with the panelists. You can email us from seedstoharvest20@gmail.com. I will type that in the chat. And so if you would like to get in contact with any of our panelists because you're interested in starting your community garden, this person is actually in your area, and they're out of Ohio, and they would like to know how to get started. So just email us from seedstoharvest20@gmail.com, and we'll connect you two. And they also had a question about if had anyone read or utilized Dr. Ridgely's book on farming in their business. And I guess if so, if you can expound on that in terms of growing a community garden.
Yes, ma'am. I've read his book, but it goes back to what the brother was saying about the laws. Here in Columbus, you cannot have a community garden and use it as a business. It has to be where the food is being distributed among the people who are participating in your garden. And in our particular case, because we sell at a farmer's market and give that money to the children, because of course an 8-year-old can't go to a farmer's market, but because we sell it and give that money back to the children, we're allowed to sell at a farmer's market.
Yes,
but
ma'am.
by law, we cannot use a city plot that is leased from the city of Ohio as a business.
Okay, so what I'm getting, like one of the major things I'm getting from these questions about community garden is that the law and knowing the law is very, very important across the board.
Yes.
Okay.
Definitely.
Another question someone had asked about growing in terms of greenhouses and growing and starting building a greenhouse is how can you when using a PVC pipe and a 6mm plastic, does it really give a longer garden season? I guess as again we're going to the winter and people are trying to grow crops in the winter. Would having like that a certain type of PVC pipe help with prolonging your greenhouse? For anyone on the panel.
Let me see. First, the answer to this question, I think, is if you go to USDA, USD has some excellent programs for they call us socially disadvantaged farmers. They have a cost share program where it allows you to put up hoop houses or these type of structures on land. The normally cost share is 75%, 25%. Therefore, a person had to put 75% of the money. Well, the government, the USDA, put up 75%, and you got to put up 25%. But since we are Black people, African people, We are classified as social disadvantaged farmers. Our culture is 90-10. Whereas the government put up 90%,
Wow.
and you only put up 10%. That 10% you can even be being labor, however you want to use it. We're not taking advantage of a lot of these programs, but if you were to go to your USDA department in your community, you can find out how you can use these to put up high tones and other type of things that would help you in your community gardens. Use them. Use USDA programs. They are set up for us to utilize. And if we don't utilize them, and matter of fact, let me put this plug in there. Do your census report. Do your census. Because if you do not do your census, some of that money that is allocated to Black people, as far as farming is concerned, is just be going in another direction. So when you do the census, we get more money, and you can utilize that money for your programs to set up those type of structures on your community garden, like the houses. And I would strongly recommend you can use PCP pipe, but you can use galvanized steel too. So you want, and the wind grows fiercely in Oklahoma, fiercely. So those PC pipe won't work in the wind here. So you can put up some hoop houses and get the funding by the government and things of this nature, and you'll be in good shape.
Thank you so much for that. And I also want to add on that we actually had a workshop on hoop houses and greenhouses. So you can refer back to our YouTube channel, From Seed to Harvest. If you type that in, from the number 2, seed to harvest, from seed number 2 harvest, then you can find us on YouTube and you can watch back on our old workshops, which answers a lot of these types of questions as well. I personally had a question for Sister Carissa. After I had done some studying on really the politics of food, there was a particular instance when I was doing that study where we were learning about community gardens and the importance of understanding the process of gardening for ourselves personally, from starting from the soil till it gets to our plate, and how that really impacts our thought process about food and how we interact with our food, and in turn interact with our own health. And one community garden I heard about, I can't remember what state it was in, but it was also a children's-based community garden where they had classes for the children, and they would grow the food and they taste the food sometimes as they're picking it out. And so my question for you is, what impact does having a community garden have in our community, and especially for children and young people? What positive impacts could that have?
Yes, ma'am. Our children renamed their garden A Peaceful Place. And so it's really interesting to watch them, because they love when strawberry season comes around. I'm trying to get the water bottles to wash it off, and they're just constantly eating it. So it's just, it's a delight, because they realize that, hey, this is something that I can eat that's healthy for me. I don't have to go to the corner store to buy a snack. I can just stop at my garden, at the children's garden, grab some strawberries, grab some pears off the pear tree. We planted apple trees. They finally came into fruition this year. Grab an apple and eat it. And so a lot of times when we first started out, we were seeing a lot of candy wrappers and things like that. We don't hardly see that anymore. So it's really interesting to watch how the children's mind changed from, I'm going to grab this bag of chips at the corner store, to, I'm going to go to the garden and pick some strawberries, or I'm going to grab an apple off the apple tree. As far as the children are concerned, they really, and when I say they run their garden, one day I went over there and they were all sitting on the edge of this raised bed. And I said, hey guys, what are you doing? They said, we're having a meeting. I'm like, so what's your meeting about? It's about the adults that come over here and pick our strawberries. And I just thought that was so interesting that they decided they were going to form their own committee and tell the adults they can't pick pick their strawberries. So to watch how children themselves organize themselves around this little small plot of land, it's fascinating to watch how their mind grows as the garden grows.
Wow, thank you so much for that story. I really, really hope that as we get involved in community gardens, that we involve our children and young people, because that is really vitally important, because it gets, like you were talking about, it gets them into a mindset of um, ownership, of good work ethic, having meetings about their strawberries. You know, it can really have some positive impacts in our community. So now I have a couple of questions from our Facebook Live watchers. And then reminder, we're about to close out, but if I can probably get another question after these questions, just send it in the chat, or if you're on Facebook Live, send it on Facebook Live. One of the questions, I believe this is the Sister Kim specifically, because you mentioned about the worms. The person had asked, how do the movements of the worms, how do the movements of the worms determine the health of the soil?
Well, what the worms do is they poop into the soil, so that helps, because their poop is like a real rich fertilizer, and what's great about they're called worm castings. And what's great about them is they don't burn. Like some fertilizers are what they call hot, and they'll burn like tender young roots. So like if you transplant something, they'll burn the roots. If you put that fertilizer right onto, right in with your transplants. But worm castings don't do that. They don't get too hot. And worms tunnel, and they put air pockets into the soil. If the soil is compact around the roots, it like chokes the roots out. They don't get they need air. And it has to do with the water getting to the soil, getting to the roots too. So worms and other, microorganisms, there's worms, there's other things that are really small that you don't see, like nematodes, and then there's the other bugs that you see in there. Every bug is not a bad, or insect is not a bad insect. Some of them are beneficial to the soil. A lot of them are. And so though as they're in the soil, they're making little air pockets that help the roots get the nutrients that they need, so they can uptake. Like I was telling you, the clay soil is real gummy, like, and can close those air pockets.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, ma'am. That makes sense. That makes sense. So the final question we have, unless someone has a last minute one that they want to ask, and this is for anyone on the panel, is there a tax write-off for agriculture depending on the square footage of the area?
I can answer that.
Yes, ma'am.
Sister Kim?
Oh, no, I said I can't answer that. I'm not at that level where I'm doing tax write-offs. So I was thinking the brother that has the farmer's market and the, larger scale growing, he might be able to answer that. Brother Kwame.
If you are doing if you're forming, if you look at your tax, there's a schedule, I want to say Schedule F, that is used for agricultural write-off. It's Schedule F or Schedule H. I think it's Schedule F. So any type of seeds, fertilizer, et cetera, equipment or whatever, you can put it on your Schedule F and then use it as a tax write-off.
All right. And Sister, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, do you have to be like have a certain acreage or be a certain type of farmer to do that, Brother Kwame?
I don't think so. If you're just a person who's contributing to a farmer's market or to purchase seeds for et cetera, and you have enough money that you think you consider you can write it off. Be sure to use that Schedule F when you be filing your income tax. That will
Yes,
be
sir.
considered as a tax write-off. Now, I'm not a tax person,
Yeah.
so if
Yeah, I got you.
IRS come get you, they become get you and not me. But use
Yes,
Schedule
sir.
F. Yeah,
Yes, sir. We'll look into it. Okay.
Carissa, did you have anything to add to that?
No, ma'am, because we are under a 501c3, a nonprofit organization. So they are a fiduciary agent. So all our funding comes through them, but we don't get a tax write-off.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you. Thank you all so much for answering these questions. Again, I just put in the chat if you have, if you would like to get in contact with any of our panelists, just send an email to fromseed2harvest20@gmail.com and we will connect you with them. Just let us know who you would like to get in contact with. We have Brother Kwame, Sister Carissa, and Sister Kim. So without further ado, we're going to be closing out the program. And so I will turn the program back to our host, Sister Rhonda. So as we transition, just give it a couple of seconds. Thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Okay. Take this. All right. Welcome back with you again. I would like to say we got a wealth of information, invaluable information, free information. Now, I'm going to ask the audience, how many of you are ready to either start your own community garden or get involved? Raise your hands or show hands. Okay, it's time to get involved. Why it is day, as they say. So thank you so much, everyone. I'm going to give announcements before I close out our program. For next month, we're doing food preservation, which is food dehydration, freeze-dried, and canning. That will be on Sunday, October 25th. So tune in for that. Then November, we're doing using our garden to stay healthy, using what we have in our garden to stay healthy. Or if you have a little illness, what could we do? We'll talk about that. And we're going to end the year closing out December on animal husbandry and utilizing a quarter acre to a half acre to do a homestead. So it's going to be wholesome and holistic. So all your answers, all your questions you have will be answered in one of our workshop series. Now, I would like you to do me a favor. Just don't tune in today. I would like you to share this with friends and family. We have a community out there that needs this information. It just doesn't belong to us. It belongs to all of us. So share. When you get information about our next workshop, share with a friend and family that you know will benefit well from it. So we, in order to do work in this community, we all have to have the same information and knowledge base. So please share. And remember to subscribe to texting and mailing lists. Text the word seedling. Kadir, if you put it in the chat, seedlings number 31996. If you will want to subscribe and get text and mail information. And you could join our email list by going to fromseed2harvest20@gmail.com. You'll see that also in the chat. And we would love to repost your businesses and the progress of your garden each month. I know we're going to winter for some areas, but still will be warm for others. If you have a garden for next month and you just starting, if you even starting your own community garden, whatever you're doing, we want to celebrate. So send those pictures in to fromseed2harvest20@gmail.com. And all videos of all presentations are available on YouTube. Just go from seed to harvest, put that in, and you put the number workshop, all the workshops should come up, and you just watch that for rewatch of any of the programs. And you can send your donations to help with, you can send your donations to help with these meetings and to help for us to expand our reach for our program. You can cash app to from seed to harvest is a cash app. You can send your donation, or if you have other means of sending donations that you desire, you can also write from seed to harvest 20, and we will arrange for any other means that you like to donate. So with that said, I would love to thank my beautiful, wonderful guests, wealth of information that we can also put to use right away. Thank you, Brother Kwame, for coming. Say thank you, Sister Sharisha, for coming, and thank you, Sister Kim, for being on the show. And I'm sure our guests is delighted, because I feel the energy of knowledge, wisdom, and also humility and sharing, and not keeping to yourself, but also looking out for our community. Thank you so very much for being on our show. And I also want to also thank my family, my husband, Brother Tariq, always for tuning in and supporting whatever I do. I would like to thank my daughter, Kadir in the mirror, my tech people. You met Kadir, Amir's on the sidelines. And I also want to thank my friends and family, and give a shout out to Far Rockaway, New York, Queens, New York, Oklahoma City, Dallas, Texas, Youngtown, Ohio, study group number 9. These are areas that asked for or wanted to share a shout out. Shout out to all of you for all your support. And of course, I'd like to thank my audience, Facebook Live, and audience that tune in our Zoom meeting. Thank you so very much. I look forward to seeing you for future shows. It was my pleasure being your host and sharing this information with you, to the community. And until we see each other again, if it's the will of God, I wish us all peace, much peace and blessings. We're going to close with our garden display. Now this month I'm going to receive one garden display. So she's going to have that to herself. Tenyetta of Far Rockaway in her garden. I understand some gardens suffered some kind of either rain or some other situations occurred where some gardens start flourishing before, and some maybe had some issues with their garden that interfere with their success in sharing. But nevertheless, if you have more to share for next month, if you revitalize your garden, if you're doing greenhouse, hoop houses, or if you're doing community, starting your own community garden or being involved, send it to us. Let's celebrate. Let's celebrate our success, because we support one another, and in supporting one another, we help to uplift each other. Everyone have a wonderful evening, and we're going to close our show. Thank you, guests, again. May God bless.